You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Our customer is becoming more and more savvy because it's also getting a little bit fed up of people just bringing projects and forcing that into them. So he or she now understands a little bit more what they want. And it's fair to say that the contribution of Africa in terms of the CO2 emissions is quite negligible. Which part of Africa you want to go to? And what is your risk appetite? That's probably one of the big ones. Our mission is to make sure that by 2040, we have a fully electrified African continent and also to be recognized as an Africa clean energy champion. And our vision is simply to bring back power into Africa.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the third episode of the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find great people who are doing great things to unlock Africa's economic potential. For this episode, we have a very special guest, Renewables energy expert Tony Tiyou, who is a founder and CEO of Renewables in Africa. Welcome to the podcast, Tony. How are you?
I'm very good, Tessa. How are you? So hopefully you had a good break.
Yes. Much needed break. Thank you.
Excellent.
It's great to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
No problem.
I think I've only just skimmed the surface of who you are, so please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us who Tony is.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to connect with people and share the message, isn't it? Right?
Yes.
So I can definitely reassure you, you're giving enough justice to me simply by just first of all inviting me.
I hope so.
And giving me a platform for me to express myself. So having said that, my name is Tony Tiyou. So if I had to describe myself, I'm a father, a husband, and also founder and CEO of a company called Renewable in Africa. And then Renewable in Africa, it's a clean energy engineering company. We develop projects, but we also a media platform. Our mission is to make sure that by 2040, so we have a fully electrified African continent, and also to be recognized as a Africa clean energy champion. And our vision is simply to bring back power into Africa. So that's what I am and who we are as the Renewables in Africa as well.
Fantastic. So obviously your company is Renewables in Africa. So where and how did your renewables journey begin?
It's a very interesting question, and thank you for asking that.
No problem.
I actually still remember I was attending this event, right? And it was a brilliant event filled with a lot of people. And it was called the Electrification of Africa. And then we had a brilliant expert talking. And I still remember this image, this satellite image showing the distribution of power across the globe. And then it was the first time for me to see that. And it really shocked me. Why? Because across all the continent, so there was one that was particularly dark. And you wouldn't be surprised to know that it was the continent of Africa. Now it sounds trivial because everybody, I'm sure, have seen this image. But for me, it was the first time I see that. That was more than 13 years ago. And it shocked me to the point that, it sort of encouraged me to find out more about the situation, right? And then obviously challenged me to also be part of the solution, because what I sometimes say that once you know something, it's difficult now for you to pretend that you don't know that anymore. You can choose not to do anything, but you can also choose to be part of a solution.
Yes.
And this is actually how it started. It started for me. I'm just going to give you like a very short version. Obviously, I was an engineer. I'm still an engineer, but it was in automotive. And I decided right at that moment to move into renewables energy. Obviously, it was a long journey. I had to go to twist and turn, some disappointments, also some lots of achievement, I would say. But as I say, this is really what actually changed my whole career, and not just a career, my whole life, because I've actually dedicated my life into it, and that has become my passion. And that's what has taken me into renewables energy and renewables in Africa specifically.
So before this, if we call it enlightening moment.
Exactly.
Did you...
An epiphany.
Epiphany, exactly. Epiphany. Before this moment, did you intend to focus on Africa, or was it at this moment when you attended this event, the conference, you thought, that you would focus your energy on the African market?
So again, another excellent question. I would say right at that moment, I knew I wanted to do something for Africa and in Africa. But it's also fair to say that when I then make the journey to go from automotive into renewables energy, I first of all had to look at the global industry.
Yes.
Because I always believe that it's important to have that global picture so that you know then how it impacts the local, well, if we can call it local, obviously Africa is right, it's very big. Yeah. But at least the regional situation, it allows you to better understand it. So I had, as I say, kind of a journey that took me to the whole of the industry as a first step, especially here in the UK. So wind energy, offshore wind. But then I moved progressively into Africa, and that's how I suggest people also do that, because like I say, it gives you a good global picture. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Fantastic. So what is it specifically about Africa that drew you in?
Yeah, well, it's simply because, listen, I'm from Africa. Yes. That's just as simple as that. Because I remember when I started building the business, at the time, I had a bit of the business was in the UK, another bit was in the continent of Africa. And very quickly, I had to make a choice because it becoming sometimes difficult to, for like two rabbits at the same time. Obviously, focusing on the UK, I believe would have been better financially for me, or at least to achieve, let's say, a sustainable model much more quickly. But really, my heart was into Africa. I'm doing it because I want to be impacting the continent. This is what actually drove me into the industry. And for me, it's difficult for me to do something if I don't really believe fully into it. So that's really what drew me into that, because, and by the way, I grew up in the continent, right? In Cameroon. So I still remember how I grew up. Like I say, when I saw that picture, then I had that flashback. Remember how obviously in having those dark streets. I'm not saying everything's dark, obviously not, right? No. Clearly there's a lot of improvement that we can make. And I was just thinking, I grew up just like that, and I want to make sure that I can do something so that children of today can have, like you say, a better future than what I'm having or what obviously I could have. Basically, I want to be part of the solution. That's what drew me into it. It's that emotional attachment. Just as simple.
So you mentioned obviously that it would have been a lot easier for you to achieve a sustainable business if you focus on the UK. And you also mentioned about growing up in Cameroon. Renewables in Africa has been going for over 5 years now. Yeah. And during that time, I've seen so many companies who are doing business in Africa come and go. And you've managed to sustain your business for over 5 years, which is a great achievement. So are there any specific skills, knowledge or experience that you have that you feel have enabled you to kind of last 5 years or more in Africa?
I would say you have to pray. No. I think every entrepreneur would tell you that entrepreneurship is a journey.
Yes.
Yeah. You start somewhere, most likely where you end up is not to where you think you would have been. Really, you really have. It's really a journey, and you need to be flexible. You need to know, okay, what is your focus? What is that you want to do? But be flexible about the pathway, because I always think you will have an idea, you will start implementing your idea, and you will get the feedback from the market.
Yes.
And that feedback will tell you whether or not this is the right path for you. And the funny thing is you can apply the exact same methodology that somebody else has done, but for whatever reason, it wouldn't work for you. Maybe because there's a couple of elements that means that for what you typically want to design, it's not necessarily suitable, right? So like I say, so there's no that one silver bullet. So for me, having a lot of flexibility, it's important. Another thing that is very important for me is you need to have a good global understanding of the market, because sometimes people, when they come into the sector, they forget that this is just, I would say, one part of the global industry, the global power industry. So you need to have that good understanding that obviously what are the key drivers of this industry globally?
Yes.
How does it shape the regional situation, and how is it potentially impacting businesses? How can you need to have a global understanding? Very important. And obviously that's why, obviously for me, having done that before, it allowed me to know how and when I need to pivot, where should I go through, and so on and so forth. Like I say, it definitely has been a journey. Being an engineer has helped me as well, because we tend to have good analytical skills.
Yes.
Right, and allowed me as well, and then to understand the. Don't forget, first of all, especially for what we do, we're a developer of solar project, and you need to technically understand what it means and how it's done to be able to do that correctly. And you need to understand how business works, because there's a difference. Because at the beginning of my career, a lot of people would think that we were a charity. Nothing wrong with charity, by the way. But clearly for me, if you're having a charity model, it's definitely different than a for-profit model. So you need to understand business. And I had to learn all of that. And I say that being able to have good technical skills and good business skills as well has allowed me to navigate the wave, I would say. Yeah. So those are a few tips that I can share with you.
Yeah. So you did mention in terms of the flexibility is key to you being able to sustain your business and to develop and grow. So I'd like to touch upon that in terms of the flexibility. How did the flexibility enable you to navigate some of the challenges you faced, and what challenges did you face when you first started your business in Africa?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me first say that when I started the business focusing on the continent, I had, I would say, a good, business school model, which would say you start in one place, small place, and then you expand. Yeah, that's what everybody would tell you. And I still agree with that, by the way. So I actually started developing the business in Botswana. Why Botswana? Simply because one of my best friends, and it was also my mentor in business, or at least my first mentor in business, so runs a company there, and he's quite successful. And we met here in the UK, but now he's back into Botswana, and he's running a very successful business. So I thought, okay, and because obviously since he's back there, so I'm traveling sort of at least once a year back to Botswana. So it's a country I know well. Okay. It's a relatively well-run country. You know, obviously, relatively is a term compared to some other places in the continent, and also is a rich country. So I thought, okay, and because it's well-run, it's a small country. So if I get, how can I say that, a good model running there, I can make mistakes as well there. It's a smaller market. Then I get to learn the business. Yeah, I get to learn the skill. Then I can go on and expand into bigger market, right? And also more challenging market. Yes. So that's what, on the paper, it looks great. Now, in practice, I still experience lots of challenges with momentum, right? Because obviously the pace at which things are going, for example, in the continent, clearly different from what, for example, you would have in other part of the world, like, for example, in Europe, in US, and so on and so forth, right? So that was a challenge. That was a challenge for me. And the other thing as well, like I said, if you're a business, you need to be making money. You need to have revenue, otherwise you can't sustain, right? So that's another challenge that I had. And you have to get leads. And this is the thing, when now in a small market, you can't get that much lead, especially for Botswana, a country that runs a lot on coal, for example, as you know. So at the time, and bear in mind, we talked about some time ago now obviously things look a little bit more interesting than it used to be. So it wasn't that competitive just yet. Right? I have all of that. So basically that forces me, that's where the flexibility comes into place. It forces me to look to expand faster than what I would have anticipated. And I was still very uncomfortable doing that. Because for me, I was still in the learning process. I didn't have the confidence that I will have right now. But like I say, but when you're determined to go ahead no matter what, so you look at what solution you have in front of you and you actually learn to adapt. And up until today, we keep on learning. So we were simply a technical advisor to other developers, right? And also providing as well some market insight. to the point that whereby now today we are a developer, we're fully embracing it. Yeah, moving forward with that. And we're also working to develop a financial facility to help us to finance our own projects. So that's the journey we're into. Yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, thank you for sharing some of the initial challenges. Do you believe that some of these challenges still exist in Africa's renewable industry? And if so, what solutions do you feel could be implemented to remove some of these challenges?
Obviously, challenges still exist. Those challenges that I mentioned will still exist, because when you are coming as a new business, a new company, you have two main challenges. Number one, people don't know you. Or number two, people don't know your company. So you need to work around that, right? So that's what I'm saying. You need to be looking at what solutions are possible. Clearly, you need to market your company, right? You have the traditional outlet where you can do that, or you can use a social media. One of the things, for example, that we did in order for us to get lead to also come to us is also to start by educating the market, because we could clearly see as well that there was a gap there. This is where we started the media platform side of the business. Because when we started, remember, I told you we were simply a technical advisor.
Yes.
But the thing is, if people don't know you, they won't come to you. And also, you may be going to people, but if they don't understand what you're talking about, you're going nowhere. So we understood that, first of all, for even us to start even marketing whatever service we have, we also simply have to also share the information so people get to understand it a little bit more.
Add value.
So this is how we started the media side. And the funny story is, we started it as a blog. That was just a simple blog that I was writing at the time. And it turns out, because there was clearly a need for it, it sort of picked up. We had a lot of return. And that's why we evolve it, from a simple blog, obviously, to the full-blown media platform that we having right now. So that's from the market side. And then from the operations, you need to find the right partner in place for you to be able to do that. And you need to be able to find as well to solve the project the right way. I know at the moment, one of the main issues people are having when they're sourcing project is just they rely on what I call ask a friend strategy, which is simply, I want to do a project, let's say in Africa. I know somebody's from Congo. Let me ask him if he knows a project.
Yes.
Like I said, I sometimes joke and say, listen, that's what people, other developers, from other part of the world come to your investor say, would you imagine having such an approach? You go from the French market, the UK market, German market. I know a French guy. Can you connect me to a project? But that's what people are doing. But I say, no, you have to have a structured approach, because the person you're going to know, first of all, does he know the market? Does he know what you're looking for? Does he have the right contact? Does he know how to run the project? There's just so many things you need to be looking at. So I always would advise to approach a trusted partner for you to be able to make sure that you get the right quality of leads. So I just some of it that I mentioned. Like I can go on and on and on, but I know there's not more question that we need to cover.
I'd like you to go on and on about this, because obviously you've touched upon it, but for the listeners, for myself as well, what would you say are some of the major do's and don'ts when investing in renewable energy projects in Africa?
When you're investing into renewable energy project in Africa, first, for me, it depends what kind of investor you are. But one of the key things is you need to decide which side of the industry you want to focus on. The industry can be split into three parts very quickly. So you have the utility scale. Those are big, large projects that everybody know about. We mentioned about that on a regular basis. You can tap into that. You also have the C&I space, right? So which is more looking at the commercial, industrial, the business side of things, private sectors. Most of the time, we also have some public companies as well, where you're providing power directly to companies that are using power, right? That's on-site solar power. That's another sector. Or you have the off-grid, or the mini-grid and solar home system. So when you come in as an investor, you want to understand which of those free sectors you want to really tap in. Like I say, I'm making it very, very simple because I don't want to complicate things. Which of those free you want to be investing in, first of all. And most of the time when the investor come, they tend to focus on the utility scale. That's great, right? No problem at all. Yeah. But like I'm saying, there's other parts of the industry you may want to look at. Then you also want to understand which part of Africa would you potentially be interested in? Because look, if you want to focus on the utility scale, it may not be the same area that you want to go to, right? For example, if you go to East Africa, there's a lot of off-grid, mini-grid going on over there. West Africa, you would tend to have the bigger project, right? So that's just to make it a little bit simple. So you need to understand which part of Africa you want to go to, and what is your risk appetite? That's probably one of the big ones. Yes. What is your risk appetite? Because most of the time people come and say, they used to say that quite a lot, the bigger the better. Hey, but I'll say, if you just think about that a little bit, right? Everybody say the bigger the better. And there's only few big and good projects in Africa. So that means for the 2-3 projects that will come up, you have everybody jumping into that.
Yes.
Right? So guess what? That's what I'm saying. So is it really a good strategy? You want to ask yourself. So you shouldn't be surprised if you don't find many projects afterwards. Now, if you thinking that, okay, if you think otherwise, say, okay, I may want to take a little bit more risk, right? Basically to intervene or to engage with the developer on the ground or the local developer a little bit early stage so I can help him to develop this project. So I can get the project at a cheap price, but get a good project, and a good project that I can get into my portfolio. So that's a strategy that you may want to go forward and do. And not a lot of people will do that. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing, as I say, don't hesitate to approach people that have the knowledge, that are experienced and track record, and have a budget for it. This is the thing as well that kills me. People will come and say they want project, they don't want to, they don't have a planned budget for it. They say, oh, everything going to be paid only on commission. I'm saying, listen, let's think about that carefully. Whether you like it or not, you will spend money. The question is whether you will spend it internally or externally. But you'll be surprised to know that, there was a couple of studies, I can't remember that on top of my mind, which was saying that on average, developers are spending about $500,000 per year to source projects in Africa. And you'll be surprised that for most of these developers, in fact, they have very, very poor results.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes there are no project that they will source, no valid project that they will source, right? And then you want to ask this guy, wouldn't you be basically interested to spend, like I say, a tenth of that just to engage with somebody that is credible,
yes, knows
the market, have track record, and get the real project, right? But the problem for them, they all think, okay, if I'm paying something, I'm losing. So no, you're already losing anyway because you're not getting project. That's number one. Two, yeah? And then you're going to lose it if you don't know the market really well. So those are kind of things that obviously, but I know because this is not how the industry works, it's sometimes difficult to get people to understand it. And I can tell you clearly, that's one reason, because of that frustration, we understood that there was no need for us to stay on as a technical advisor because people don't pay attention to this piece of advice. We say, okay, so we may as well just start working directly with people that need the power anyway, which are the businesses. So yeah, so that couple of things I could say.
I don't think that's just specific to the renewable sector in Africa. I see it just generally when people are looking for African market entry or expansion. You see sometimes a lot of reluctance to actually spend money, which is quite interesting. So I mean, leading on from that in terms of the do's and don'ts of investing in Africa, you have the media side, you're quite visible. I'm sure you're frequently approached by people who have new and brilliant products that they believe are suitable for Africa. What would you advise to do in order to determine whether their product is suitable for the African green economy?
Okay, and yes, I can confirm what you say. I get approached on a regular basis. I can even tell you that over the past years, I'm getting even more and more people coming with new storage technology solutions. And the funny thing is, because obviously storage is obviously the holy grail that many people will say. And the funny thing, every time people approach you, they are convinced that's good for them, that they have the perfect solution for the continent. Usually what I would say when somebody brings such a new technology, the African customer, I know we don't always like to generalize, but let me just do that in this particular context. African customer is becoming more and more savvy because it's also getting a little bit fed up of people just, bringing projects and forcing that into them. So he or she now understand a little bit more what they want. So for people just like that, I think, first of all, you want to demonstrate that your product has good track record somewhere in the world, right? Possibly in Africa shows as well, if possible, one or two examples, because that's what people will want to see. Your project have a good track record, so somewhere in the world, and even better, somewhere in Africa, so that we could see that it works. And then people also want to understand, okay, so what real benefit is it going to give me compared to what I already have? Is it really significant to the point that I want? Because if you look at things, right? So, and that's one of the issues that solar had at the beginning, right? Yeah. It was okay. The initial issue was it's not competitive price-wise, no problem. But the other thing that people don't talking about is also how robust is the solution over time. Because if I run a business, if I run a factory, right, a cement factory, I may be using diesel generator. That's what people were thinking, right? Using diesel generator. I know it's expensive, but I know it works.
Yes.
I know if my factory is working 24/7, I know I'll be able to deliver, and I know I'll be able to get my product and go and sell it and get the money. So your new product may be cheaper, but can you guarantee to me that when I need it, it works? So that's the kind of, so the robustness is very important whenever you bring as well a new product. So people want to see that. First of all, you had the example, you have a prototype somewhere in the world, possibly in Africa, that works. That's number one. Over time, what is the robustness of that prototype? Yeah. What is, does it really give us significant advantage in determining advantage that I can say, yes, that's important? And then price-wise, does it make sense as well? If it compares with what I have at the moment. So I would say people bringing in new technology, I will look at those three questions. So I have track records, do you have a prototype somewhere in the world or in Africa? How robust is is your solution, and does it really bring significant benefit? And how does it compare from price point? So, and that would be, yeah. To that, you can quickly add as well the question of maintenance over time, right?
Yes.
Because you may have a great product, but if that product is meant to last for 20 years, we know you're only going to last for 20 years if there is some good maintenance. And how can you guarantee that? And that's part of what I call the robustness as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so you need to factor in the total life cycle cost of the actual product.
It has to be. Yeah.
So leading on from that, once someone has determined their product is suitable for the African market, how would you advise they go about raising awareness about their product or solution in the African green economy? How do they go about doing that?
Yeah. Again, that would depend on who is your customer, right? Is it a B2B product? Is it a B2C? It will be slightly different. So if you do a B2C, for example, ultimately, you want to go and advertise your products where your customer is, right? You need to find a way where your customer is. Let's imagine, for example, if I want to reach out to hospital managers, right? I need to understand, is there any association of hospital managers that are around that I can reach out? To. If I had to go, if there is, then you want to make sure that you approach these guys. And if there is any place on social media, for example, a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group, whereby they are, you want to make sure that you reach out to them as well there. And don't forget, after that as well, the simple, direct marketing, door to door, which is very, which is very powerful as well. Just approaching people and talk to them. So there's multiple ways that you can market your product. But the key thing is to understand, first of all, who is your ideal, what is your target audience? Who is your ideal customer? How does it look like? And where can I find that person? And from there, you can look at multiple avenues. Social media is a big part of it, but you also have the good old traditional marketing. It also depends on your budget. Most of the time, when you're starting, you have a small budget, but if you're a big company, so you may afford, you may be able to afford, some of the more expensive routes, but more effective routes as well to reach out to customers.
Fantastic. Going off on a different direction, I'm a huge renewables advocate, and as you are a renewables expert, there's obviously a question or some discussions I've been having recently with fellow Africa business kind of professionals or advocates. Recently we had COP26, and there's a huge focus on reducing greenhouse emissions, and historically Africa's greenhouse emissions has been quite negligible. I think at the moment it stands to 2 to 3% of the global greenhouse emissions come from Africa. Why do you believe there's so much global interest in Africa reducing its carbon footprint?
Those are very good questions, actually, Thursday, I have to say. These are questions that I get on a regular basis. The fact that and it's fair to say that the contribution of Africa for in terms of the CO2 emissions is quite negligible, right? So you mentioned that it's actually 2-3%. It's more 3% this day. You can see it's increasing now, right? So
Okay.
So there's multiple ways to look at that, but I want to mention at least two of them, right? Let me just take an image. So it's almost like we having, a cooking pot that is boiling, So
Yes.
It's boiling at the moment, and it's full of water, hot water, right? 98% of that water, you basically doesn't come from you. Somebody else poured that in, and you just had like a 2% on top of it, but it's full, right? Guess what? It may be you may have just only 2% contribution, but if you add on top of that, guess what? It's going to start spitting.
Yes.
And when it starts spitting, it's gonna mess up everybody's life. Whether or not you only put in 2% or the 98%. And this is exactly what we're talking about here. It's not like the African continent sits in isolation somewhere in the planet Mars, whereby obviously we should not be concerned about what we need to do to tackle the challenge that we all facing as part of planet Earth, right? That's what we have to understand. Yes, we don't have the legacy responsibility, and because without a legacy responsibility, it should give us some leverage to negotiate with other part of the world and say, hey, if we are to contribute, and we will contribute, but this is what we want in return, right? That's just a fair game. But all I'm saying, but at the end of the day, we still struggle from the same thing. And guess what? The African continent, it's one of the places that suffer the most from the impact of climate change. And we could see that. You go to Mozambique, you see that. You go to Kenya, you see that. All countries, you see that, right? And this is what I'm saying. You're thinking about that cooking pot. That's already full. We only had 2% of the water that was there. But even if we add a small piece of it, it's still going to spill over. And when they spill over, we all struggle. And guess what? These guys, those wealthy nations, they have money, to deal with the consequences. We don't, basically. Yes. So that's what I'm saying. We don't want to make the problem worse. That's what I'm saying. That's why we still need to be part of a solution. And that's why, for me, I think it's right to say the African continent also should decarbonize. Now, the second part of my answer would be, we know that by 2050, the power demand in Africa is going to quadruple, basically. So we need more power. We know that. There's only two ways we can go. More fossil fuel or more clean energy, basically. Go more fossil fuel, we know the damage it's going to bring, right? We know the damage, and we all say we want to industrialize. That's why we need to make sure that the additional power that is needed, to take Africa to a place where the continent is really growing, needs to be cleaner than what we're doing right now. And I've always said to people, I'm saying that joking, but that's true. If you can find me a cleaner power than clean energy, I take it. Because all I want for me is obviously clean power so that it doesn't add up to the problem. So this is what, just because we need that more power, like I said, we can only go fossil fuel or more renewables energy. So that's why we need to make sure that as well we have a sustainable way of getting the additional power that we need. So it's important, like I say, for my African brothers and sisters to say that, yeah. And we should, but it doesn't mean that we are not recognizing the fact that some other people have some legacy responsibility. It doesn't. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying why we should use that to make sure that we better negotiate with our partners. We also should know that we have as well a duty to make sure that we don't make the issue worse.
So you mentioned about the growing demand of power or energy in Africa. Obviously, enhancing access to power across the continent is a key priority.
Yeah.
Do you think this can be achieved through renewable energy, or what role can renewable energy play in all of this?
I definitely think yes, it can be achieved with renewables energy, 100%. I have no doubt about that. So now, when I'm saying that, I'm not saying that overnight we're going to go 100% renewables energy. Let's be honest. I don't think at the moment it's doable. We may get there, and I'm hoping that we get there at some point. But like I said, remember, I'm an engineer, right? So I know as well what is possible right now. But I also know one thing, right? So whenever basically humans has decided that they want to really achieve something, when we set our mind into it, we find solutions. And the best demonstration of that, it's simply this pandemic. Listen, whether we agree or not with the vaccine, this is not a question. The fact of the matter is, in 6 months, we were able to come up with a solution that takes people decades to do.
Very
simply
true.
because we pulled all our effort together. And we found solutions that we thought were not possible or not. And like I say, this is not a question of whether or not you like the vaccine. I'm just saying this is what was possible to bring together. Same thing. All of a sudden, we always hearing that there's no money. So trillions just came out of nowhere.
Yes.
Just because people, came together saying we need to address this. So if we have the same spirit, I don't see why we can't be using renewables energy to carry on with the industrialization of Africa. At the moment, we know that the right solution is probably to have a power mix, where we have a lot more renewables energy and still some level of fossil fuel. But clearly, we need to increase the part of renewables energy. So for me, definitely, I believe it's possible. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And every day we're finding new solutions. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that transitioning from energy generated through fossil fuels to energy generated through renewable resources will take some time. And obviously it contains its own challenges. I think the important question is, how can Africa make this transition without impacting its economic growth?
First of all, when you're changing states, right? You're moving, from one state to another. Like you're saying, we should go through a transition period, and and in that transition period, we should also accept that not everything will be easy at first, right? Because we all have our habits, our way of doing things. If you're changing the way things work, you need to give yourself some time before things settle down. So we need to understand that. So I'm not one of those who think that we should be telling people the fact that, to get again, think that, okay, we can move from one state to the other without having to struggle at all. Everything will be smooth. No, it wouldn't. That's a lie. I don't believe into that. So we should also expect that, okay, there's going to be some challenges in the way, but if we're still working toward the same objective, we will get there. So Africa definitely going through this energy transition should expect to have some serious challenge to address. But that's what we need to come together and look at that. But look at about addressing those challenges from a holistic and concerted approach, whereby we're looking at all the different elements, all the different areas that we need to take into consideration and working towards it. And personally, that's the way I think we're smart enough. We're smart enough to deal with that as long as we can come together. Like I say, we can really think about the COVID spirit, the way we've done things. Look at that. Now, before it was a full lockdown, now obviously there's still a lot of cases here and there around the world, but we're still now able to at least carry on to some respect with our life, right? So it's not what we used to be. Obviously, it's a different world, if you may say so. I'm also expecting that going to the energy transition, it was going to be a different continent. Some challenges, but also lots of opportunities. But if we're looking at that from, like I say, from a holistic point of view, where we're going to look at economically, what does that mean? Technically, what does that mean? Socially, what does that mean? How do we come up with solutions? Have, obviously, a roadmap. How do we take this roadmap? How do we control that we're still moving towards the right direction? And are we flexible enough and humble enough to recognize that if we fail at implementing one aspect, we can still retract and change it and go into another way? Personally, that's the way I look at that. And I can say, even we need to change our own life, basically. Sometimes people are saying that, when you want to go to sustainable way of life, it means that you need to eat less meat. People say, I don't see the correlation, but it's just simple. The meat that you get on your plate, right? It comes from factories that needs to obviously operate some machines to get it in the shape and form that you want. Every time you see machine, I want people to understand, every time you see machine, you need to see energy behind it.
Yes.
Anything you see machine, there's energy behind it. And the more complex the machine is, the more likely it will consume some energy. So yes, operating or producing basically a loaf of meat may take more energy than, for example, just having vegetable. And that's why, for example, and that has to be explained to people so that you understand. So it has a lot of challenges, and the changes is at every level, including our own individual life. And that we need to understand. But we need to accept it, because if we know the vision where we're going to, then it's going to make it easier for us to understand and accept that change, that transition period.
So from your experience, do you believe that the regulatory regimes in Africa would make it difficult or make it easy to enable this transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy?
The answer is yes. It's actually making it difficult. I would say, according to me, that's probably the biggest challenge, because we're still in an industry that's a lot regulatory driven, right? Yes. So it starts there. So if you don't have the rights to implement a certain solution, if you don't have the right, for example, to sell power or to generate power, there's nothing you can do, right? Because you can't circumvent the law. So yeah, unfortunately, regulatory regime, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there. Yeah, definitely. So I believe with African countries relaxing some of this rule, it will make it easier. Just to give an example, an example of this rule could be, for example, implementing net metering. That can help a lot. So what is net metering for people that wouldn't know? It means that you're producing in private capacity some power, let's say renewable energy power, that you consume part of it, but you have some excess. What would you do with your excess, right? So at the moment, in many countries, it's not possible to sell that excess back to the grid. So what we're saying that if there was a possibility to implement it, just like it is in many other parts of the world, that would even make the industry even more attractive, and people will go. People will actually embrace it even more. You have the feed-in tariff. That's another policy that's possible. It has been working in some countries, for example, in Kenya, not anymore. So there is a whole range of policies that could be implemented, including as well tax incentives, right? Or yes. VAT incentive for because at the moment in the continent, because we don't have a lot of manufacturing facilities, so most of the equipment is actually procured from outside, right? So most of the time from Asia. So it means that when they come, they're subject to levies, right, and duties. So including VAT. So and that could be a significant addition to the project cost. If you think, for example, some of them have VAT of let's say 17%. Then you have a duty import, another 10-20% is add up, right? So working on that is going to help significantly. So I would say the regulatory regime can make it a lot easier, I would say.
Yeah, so if we have more enabling regulatory regimes, the access to the industry or the sector would be a lot easier.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, how can Africa or African governments go about increasing its marketing of investment opportunities in the renewables sector to kind of mobilize those projects that are available?
So, I think your previous question, it's part of the answer, isn't it?
Yeah.
So to have enabling policies that will encourage investors to come into the country, but also local investors to also tap into the sector, including developers. And that's one part of it. And also allowing skills to be developed locally. Because one of the things, for example, that we working on renewables in Africa, we've developed and we took the pandemic as an opportunity for us to do so, right? Because that's what I'm saying, the flexibility is very important. Obviously, flexibility of thinking. Because we saw that as an opportunity to create a masterclass whereby we are encouraging people who wants to become solar entrepreneur to be able to do so and acquire the skills.
Fantastic.
Because at the moment, the way things are done, most of the time, developers or solar, when I say solar developer, those are solar entrepreneurs, right? So they come from outside. They come from Europe, from the US, from Asia. They come and develop project in Africa, and after that they will be gone. Most of them, right? So the local skill, the local people are simply being used most of the time just as labor. They don't develop the skills locally. So for us, for example, to become a solar developer, I have to learn it in the job. There's not really a training for that, I would say. You have a training to become an installer, but it's different to become a developer. A developer, you need to see that almost like a real estate developer. This is a guy who actually will conceive the project on the paper and take it all the way into a physical asset and engage all the different parties, whether the builder, the investor, the insurer, and so on and so forth. For solar, look at the same thing. You just replace your building by your solar assets. So that's why your solar developer is. But what I'm saying is actually, if you were saying today, say, even you can do that actually. Imagine you say, I want to start developing project, I don't know, in Niger, in Nigeria, whatever country you want to. How do you go about doing it? You really want to do it, but how do you do it? That's what I'm saying. So
True.
that's the question that we solving. So we created a solar masterclass, but where we provided the roadmap for people that they can go all the way from beginners to the expert to get the knowledge to assist them in to do that. And I'm saying that simply to say that these kind of skills training should be made available as well by local government to train the local workforce for them to be able to move that, especially as you know, whether we like it or not, the world and also the continent tend to move more towards cleaner energy, renewables energy. There needs to be a transfer of skills, from OG, oil and gas into this, yeah? So that means this has to happen. So if you don't want workers to be shipped from outside of the continent, you need to train your people as well. So so the regulatory, they can do that, from skills and training that they can do that. And also they can encourage local investors to invest into the project. When I'm talking about local investors, you can think about some local pension funds in Africa that could do that. But because we always rely on money coming from outside. The thing is, the local pension fund, at the moment, they don't know enough about the market, and there's always a little bit worry. When we say that the sector is risky, the first people who think the sector is risky is people actually are in the continent. And that's not normal. What I'm saying, if you want to build your place, you should start doing it. I'm saying, okay, there's not a lot of capital market. There could be more, but there's already some. At the exception of, for example, of South Africa, Johannesburg, Nairobi, Casablanca, and Lagos, you find it hard to find other capital market places. That actually makes sense. And I'm saying we should also invest a lot more into that, including the diaspora.
I agree.
People always saying, yeah, how can I contribute? Simple. You have an association of Congolese or Nigerian come together, put a pot, and go invest into a solar project. Engage with people like me. I can show you a project where you can invest. You become the investor.
100%.
That's what I'm saying. Once you really put your mind into it, there are solutions. We just need to basically accept that, okay, we need to come together and start thinking holistically and be open-minded. But there are solutions around.
I love your point with regards to the masterclasses that you've developed to give people the required skills and knowledge to progress and be employable in the future. So leading on from that, where do you see Africa in 5 years' time from a renewables energy perspective?
Yeah, good question. For the masterclass, what I do, I will drop you a link so that you'll be able to share that with people who are interested in taking it. Now, where is the continent going to be in 5 year time? It's good to say that the continent is not evolving at the same speed, isn't it? Right? Some countries are faster to embrace the sector than others. For example, the usual suspect at the moment. So the key markets, you have the likes of South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, Senegal as well now, who's actually making good progress, including Namibia. So I believe if we look at those markets in 5 year time, they'll be a lot more advanced than other people. But the other now I start to follow up a little bit. So basically, in 5 years time, just simple, I'm just going to see an Africa at multiple speed. And it's not surprising because this is a continent of 1.4 billion people, right? So we can't expect, all of these places and 54 countries. We can't expect all these places to be all at the same place because some places will be. That's simply what I say. It's going to be a mosaic of places, right?
Yes, I agree.
At different level. So this is where I'm seeing the continent. Yeah.
Yeah. So as we mentioned at the beginning of the interview, renewables in Africa has been going for 5 years. Where do you see renewables in Africa in 5 years' time?
Well, in 5 years for me, I'm hoping that we would have developed a lot more projects, at least 100 megawatts, if not more. So brilliant. I'm hoping that we'll have a financial facility that allowed us to finance our project ourselves. So that'd be great. And I want to make sure that we build a big media platform empire so that we can make sure that we can raise awareness about renewable energy across Africa, but also across the world. So this is how I see ourselves in 5 years' time.
Fantastic. And I believe you'll achieve it and even greater things.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Quote of the week.
As business people, we often have quotes, mantras. As Africans, we sometimes have African proverbs or affirmations that keep us going when times are hard. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
Yeah, one quote that I always refer to that. It's one from Nelson Mandela, which simply says that it always seems impossible until it's done. Yes. And that's exactly what I because I'm aware of the fact that the mission I've given to myself and to the company is a big one. It's a huge one, right? But I think this is, if you really want to take the continent forward, that's what we need to do, right? We need to aim big. We need to think about scalable solution, and we need to believe in ourselves and also believe in our people. Yes, it's going to be challenging, but hey, just go for it. At the end of it, you never know where you're going to end up.
100%, I agree. So as we're coming to the closing of our great conversation, do you have any closing remarks or calls to action that you'd like to give?
Yeah, I would say for people listening to this talk, and I'm sure there's going to be many, don't just listen to that and just carry on with your life. If it really speaks to you, take action. Because I always say, I've heard a lot about the fact that we say knowledge is power.
Yes.
To be honest, for me, I think it's partially true. Knowledge is not really power. There's lots of knowledge out there, and that's why we still end up still here, right? If you're not applying that, it goes nowhere, right? There's lots of what I call shelf knowledge. It's there by shelf. Nobody benefits from that. Apply knowledge for me. This is what is actually making the difference. Taking action, right? So I would encourage people listening to that who really want to be part of the solution that we are all building. At the end of it, I believe that many of us are working towards these objectives. Yeah, bringing full electrification to Africa and also getting the continent to develop. I want them to take action, right? So there's many ways that they can do that. I'm sure they can reach out to me through my LinkedIn, Tony Tiyou on LinkedIn. But obviously, I can't advise everybody because it's a bit difficult because they're very busy. That's why we actually developed a program online where I talked you about the Solar Entrepreneur Program.
Yes.
And then I'm going to be sharing the link so you can share that with people. So I strongly encourage them to look at that. We also, and people maybe say, yeah, but that's too advanced. I don't necessarily want to be a solar developer. That's too much. I just want to get into the industry. That's great. And the great news is we also develop, like I say, a shorter version for people that want to move career, go to where they are, get into renewables energy. What are the steps? Which is simply a reflection of what I have did in my career. So I'm giving you like a blueprint, right, for them to figure that out. I'll share that link as well with you. And what I would say to people, go and look at that. I'm sure that's gonna at least give you some information and just take action. And if if you're not happy with that, that's great. I'm just saying there's lots of information out there. Just do whatever it takes to make sure that you get into the industry and you bring your solution because we need it.
Yes. Fantastic. I think the key point there is take action.
That's it.
Yes. Fantastic. I think that's a great way to close today's conversation. So thank you, Tony, for giving us so much of your valuable time and for sharing your knowledge and for also being so candid and open during our conversation today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No problem. No, it was good. And I also personally have enjoyed significantly. So yeah, anything we can do to support, help where possible, then that's great. So what I think I've just pasted those links there. So feel free to share that, where suitable.
Yeah. Well, I'll be putting all your details in the show notes. So when people listen to the podcast, whether it's on like Spotify or Apple Podcast, within the show notes, they'll have links to your LinkedIn, to the Renewables in Africa website.
Excellent. That's great.
Brilliant.
Fantastic.
Okay, Tony, it's been an absolute pleasure. Please enjoy the rest of your day and week, and we will speak soon.
Excellent.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share the podcast, or tell a friend. You can also rate, review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcasts. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.